But there's a real dilemma here, and where I've settled on it is it will be faster than anything we've seen in the world, but it still has its limits. And so then when we go to buying data centers, you again, the curve I'm looking at is, okay, we've had a 10x a year increase every year. So beginning of this year, we're looking at 10 billion in annual, rate of annualized revenue at the beginning of the year. We have to decide how much compute to buy. And it takes a year or two to actually build out the data centers, to reserve the data centers. So basically I'm saying, like, in 2027, how much compute do I get? Well, I could assume that the revenue will continue growing 10x a year, so it'll be 100 billion at the end of 2026 and 1 trillion at the end of 2027. And so I could buy $1 trillion. Actually, it would be like $5 trillion of compute, because it would be $1 trillion a year for 5 years, right? I could buy $1 trillion of compute that starts at the end of 2027. And if my revenue is not $1 trillion, if it's even 800 billion, there's no force on earth. There's no hedge on earth that could stop me from going bankrupt if I buy that much compute. And so, even though a part of my brain wonders if it's going to keep growing 10x, I can't buy $1 trillion a year of compute in 2027. If I'm just off by a year in that rate of growth, or if the growth rate is 5x a year instead of 10x a year, then you go bankrupt. And so you end up in a world where you're supporting hundreds of billions, not trillions, and you accept some risk that there's so much demand that you can't support the revenue, and you accept still some risk that you got it wrong and it's still slow. And so when I talked about behaving responsibly, what I meant actually was not the absolute amount. That actually was not. I think it is true we're spending somewhat less than some of the other players. It's actually the other things, like, have we been thoughtful about it? Or are we YOLOing and saying, oh, we're going to do $100 billion here, $100 billion there? I kind of get the impression that, some of the other companies have not written down the spreadsheet, that they don't really understand the risks they're taking. They're just kind of doing stuff because it sounds cool.